Welcome to part 3 of reed making. We're going to work on the tip today. Hopefully we can get a really good reed. I'm going to start by scoring the reed, meaning leaving a shallow cut in the cane to define where the tip is going to begin. You can do this either by dragging your knife across the surface or leaning, rocking gently into the cane. This is equivalent to marking out where your tip is going to be with a pencil. It just helps you speed up the process and you don't need a pencil to do it. God, I was wondering why my voice sounds so depressed, but I just watched through all the footage. I understand. Pulling your knife across is generally the most effective, but the reason why I don't do that is because I once cut myself when it slipped off. You can see a little scar there. So that wasn't good, so since then on I've just been leaning in very carefully. You could also say, I rock. Important thing to note here is that the corners match up and the height of the arrowhead across both sides also matches up. Basically make the two blades symmetrical to one another. You'll see me adjusting with the plaque. Basically get it into a position where you can separate the blades and work on them individually, as well as in a position where your knife isn't going to just chop off the entire blade. Right now all I'm doing is making sure the corners are lining up and that it's really well set up, so I can just do this and it'll be really easy to scrape the tip from then on. Well, my cane was a bit dry, so make sure it's always wet. I find it much easier to work on wet cane on the tip than with dry cane, since that rips off very easily. And from then on you can just put your knife into those lines and remove the cane. I'm going to do this on all sides basically and at a reasonable speed so that you can watch the motions. Some people will probably call this very bad knife technique. If you're careful, you can do anything you'd like. So, as long as I don't make a big mistake, I don't think it's valid to criticize it. The reason why people don't like my knife technique is because you can really just dig out an entire chunk. I find it's okay at the start. Once the tip starts getting too thin, stop doing that or you're definitely going to rip off. Or just dig out an entire chunk of it. For now, I guess that's a valid technique. You can put your knife at a steep angle very carefully and just remove an entire layer just like that, in multiple strokes or in a single stroke. Now looking back at the video, I do think this was quite an awkward piece of cane. It felt very different from what I was used to working with, and my knife was quite dull. I did stop to sharpen it at some point, but I might have been scraping differently if the conditions were different. A good way to test how your reed is functioning without actually having to play it is to very gently squish it, and the way the opening closes will give you a good indication of how it vibrates. Here I'm looking at it behind the light. You can see on this side of the blade, on the left tip, there's a little bit too much cane there, so I'm going to go ahead and remove that. Once the blades look identical behind your light, you want to make sure that the transition between the heart and the tip looks the same on both sides. To do that, you use the profile view and make sure it's symmetrical. You want the transition area from the heart to tip to look like an S. Now here's some audio from my first take with my depressed voice. From the heart right into the tip. Totally pointless for me to peep the reed there, but I know it needs more vibration, so I'm just going to thin out the tip for now and see what happens after that. I think the fundamentals of making a good working reed, or at least a good working tip, lie in how thin you get your tip. After a certain point, the cane gets so thin that it actually vibrates less. It'll continue to vibrate more until you reach this point where it starts to dampen the sound. We like it when it dampens the sound in the right places, as not to hinder the vibration, but to hinder some of the overtones that give us a nicer overall tone. There you can see in the profile they look relatively equal, close to that, and behind a light they also look quite identical. I'm probably going to define the side a bit more. There's a bit more arrowhead on this side of the blade than the other. When squeezing a good reed, the two ends should come together first, and ever increasingly slowly should it reach the middle, just like that. The beep basically tells me it's still way too hard to play, so I'm going to thin out the heart at this point. I think I switched out my knife right there. I can't really tell actually, but went back to the bevel. Now it's much easier to pinch close, and the vibration also comes much more easily, but it's not enough, so I'm going to keep doing more and especially focus close to the upper part of the heart. Now the reed should be much easier to pinch close, but not necessarily quickly from the edges and slowly in the middle. That simply means that I need to restructure my tip. You should have the reed in playing position beeping a C, but you should be able to glist down to an A. Currently the tip is acting as one individual flat surface because it's very large and uniformly flat. So right now I'm just going to